I drove 6 hours to thank my ex-girlfriend for leaving me, and when I found out why she really did it, I wished I never came. 3 years after Lisa ghosted me without explanation, she texted out of nowhere. I know you deserve answers. If you want to know why I really left, meet me at this address Saturday at 3 p.m. I'll explain everything. She sent a location pin. For 3 years, I'd rebuilt myself. Therapy, new job, better habits. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but I needed closure. I needed to understand why someone who loved me could just vanish. I texted back, I'll be there. Saturday morning, I got in my car and started driving, rehearsing what I'd say. The 6-hour drive gave me too much time to think. Lisa wasn't the type to ghost people. In 2 years together, she'd been the most communicative person I'd ever known. She'd leave notes on my mirror, text me random thoughts throughout the day, call just to hear my voice. When her grandma died, she talked through every feeling for hours. When we fought, she never walked away without resolution. That's what made her disappearance so wrong. One Wednesday, everything was normal. We'd made plans for the weekend, talked about meeting each other's extended families at Thanksgiving. Thursday morning, I woke up to a single text. I can't do this anymore. Please don't contact me. Then nothing. Blocked on everything. When I went to her apartment, her roommate said she'd moved out overnight. Her job said she'd quit. She erased herself from my life in less than 17 hours. For months, I drove myself crazy trying to understand. Did I miss something? Was there someone else? Her friends wouldn't talk to me. Her sister hung up when I called. Eventually, I had to accept I'd never know, but I never really accepted it. Late at night, I'd replay our last conversation, looking for clues. There were none. She'd been happy, making jokes about my terrible cooking, planning our weekend hiking trip. There was no sign. Therapy helped me move forward, but it didn't answer the question that haunted me. Why would someone who communicated everything suddenly communicate nothing? Now, finally, I'd get my answer. I'd thank her for the growth that came from the pain, tell her I'd moved on, and walk away with closure. I pulled up my GPS to check the arrival time. That's when I really looked at the address for the first time. A hospital. Ice flooded my veins. The GPS directed me to the main entrance. I parked in visitor parking, hands shaking. Why a hospital? Was she sick? Had she been sick 3 years ago? I walked through the sliding doors into the sterile lobby, following signs until I reached the emergency room wing. My phone buzzed. Lisa's text. Room 164. I'm here. I found room 164 at the end of a quiet hallway. Through the small window, I saw Lisa sitting in a chair beside a hospital bed. She looked different. Thinner, tired, older than 3 years should have made her. She saw me and stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa, what's going on? Why are we? That's my mom, she said, nodding toward the room. 3 years ago, a man started following me. At first, I thought I was paranoid. Then he started leaving notes on my car, pictures of us together, you and me, with your face scratched out, threats about what he'd do if I didn't leave you. My chest went hollow. Why didn't you tell me? We could have gone to the police. I did go to the police. They said without direct threats against my life, there wasn't much they could do. So I left to protect you. I thought if I disappeared, he'd leave you alone. Her voice cracked. 7 weeks ago, he broke into my mom's house, put her in a coma. She woke up yesterday, but the doctors say she'll never fully recover. Lisa, I didn't bring you here to thank me. I brought you here because the police finally identified him. I wanted you to see his name before I pressed charges. She pulled out the police report and flipped to the last page. My blood turned to slush. The name staring back at me. Barry, my roommate. The guy who'd moved in 2 years ago after answering my Craigslist ad. The guy who made me coffee every morning and knew my entire schedule. Lisa's hands were shaking. Do you know him? I couldn't breathe. He lives with me. My hands went numb. The police report shook so hard I almost dropped it. Barry makes me coffee every single morning. Barry knows exactly when I leave for work, when I get home, when I'm sleeping in my room 20 feet away from his. I gave a stalker complete access to my entire life for 2 years. Lisa grabbed my arm to keep me standing because my knees started to give out. She was crying now, tears running down her face, saying she was so sorry over and over. She thought leaving me would keep me safe. She thought if she just disappeared, Barry would leave me alone and move on with his life. Instead, her stalker found me anyway. He answered my stupid Craigslist ad. He moved into my apartment. He's been sleeping in the room next to mine, eating meals with me, watching me, learning everything about my schedule and my habits and my life. I pulled my phone out with shaking hands and started to dial 911. Lisa grabbed my wrist and stopped me. She said we couldn't call the police yet because Barry didn't know she'd contacted me. Barry didn't know the police had identified him. If he figured out we knew who he was, he might run before they could arrest him. Or worse, he might do something crazy and hurt someone. We had to wait for the detective she'd been working with. He was already on his way to the hospital. I wanted to scream. I wanted to get in my car and drive as far away as possible. But I just stood there in that hallway, trying to breathe, trying not to throw up. Detective Morrison showed up 30 minutes later. He was a middle-aged guy with tired eyes and gray hair. He shook my hand and said he was sorry I had to find out this way. He explained they'd been building a case against Barry for weeks now. They needed enough solid evidence to make sure the charges would stick in court. They couldn't risk him getting out on some technicality. The detective told me Barry had been following Lisa for 4 years total. The harassment started a year before she even left me. At first, it was just him showing up places where she was. Then it got worse with the notes and the photos. When Lisa ghosted me and disappeared, Barry seemed to stop for a while. But he didn't actually stop. He just shifted his focus to me after he lost track of where Lisa went. I felt sick. Barry probably saw my Craigslist ad looking for a roommate and knew exactly who I was. He answered it on purpose. He moved in specifically to watch me, to learn about me, to stay close to Lisa's life, even though she was gone. Every single conversation we'd had was fake. Every time we ate pizza and watched movies together was a lie. Every morning when he made me coffee and asked about my day, he was gathering information. 2 years of my life living with someone who was pretending to be my friend while actually stalking me. Detective Morrison said I couldn't go home. Barry might already know something was wrong. The detective had noticed Barry's car circling the hospital parking lot for the past hour. That meant Barry somehow knew I was here at this hospital right now. Lisa's face went white. She said Barry must have put tracking software on my phone or my car. The detective told me to power down my phone immediately. We went down to the parking garage and he checked my car. It took him less than 5 minutes to find a small GPS tracker stuck under my rear bumper. Barry had been tracking my location this entire time. He knew everywhere I went. He probably tracked me on the 6-hour drive here this morning. The police moved us to a secure room deeper inside the hospital while they figured out what to do next. Lisa sat down next to me and took my hand. I let her hold it, even though I didn't know what I felt about her being back in my life like this. I was too scared to think about our relationship or the past 3 years or anything except the fact that Barry knew where I was. Detective Morrison came back after talking to some other officers. He said they needed to arrest Barry tonight before he realized we'd found the tracker. The plan was for me to text Barry something normal from a police phone, something casual that would make him think everything was fine. Then officers would move in and arrest him while he was distracted. I would text him that I was visiting a sick friend and would be home late, something Barry would expect, something that wouldn't make him suspicious or scared or likely to run. Detective Morrison handed me a phone, and I took it with shaking hands. My fingers felt numb as I opened a new message and typed Barry's number from memory. I stared at the blank screen trying to think of what to say that would sound normal. Finally, I typed out that I was visiting a sick friend at the hospital and would be home late tonight. I added that I'd probably grab dinner here. My thumb hovered over the send button for a few seconds before I pressed it. The message showed as delivered. Lisa stood next to me watching the screen. We waited. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. Then the 3 dots appeared showing Barry was typing. His response came through with a smiley face emoji saying no problem and that he'd save me some leftover pasta from dinner. He added another message asking if my friend was okay and if I needed anything. The casual, friendly tone made my stomach twist. This was the same guy who made me coffee every morning. The same guy who asked about my day and laughed at my jokes and split the grocery bill with me. Detective Morrison took the phone back and nodded. He said that was perfect, and Barry didn't suspect anything. Now we just had to wait for the arrest team to move in. He left the room to coordinate with the officers heading to my apartment. Lisa sat down in one of the plastic chairs and put her head in her hands. I stayed standing because I didn't trust my legs to hold me if I tried to sit. My mind kept going back to all the mornings Barry made me coffee, all the times he asked where I was going or what time I'd be home. Every question I thought was friendly interest was actually him tracking my movements. Every conversation where I mentioned plans or people were him gathering information. 2 years of living with someone who was pretending the entire time. 2 hours crawled by in that secure room. Detective Morrison came back twice to update us, but there was nothing to report yet. The arrest team was in position waiting for the right moment to move in. Lisa tried to talk to me a few times, but I couldn't focus on anything she said. My brain felt stuck on the image of Barry in our apartment right now, probably making dinner and thinking everything was normal. Finally, Morrison's phone rang. He answered it and listened for about 30 seconds. His expression didn't change, but he nodded a few times. When he hung up, he told us Barry had been arrested. They caught him in my bedroom going through my desk drawers. They found a whole collection of photos hidden in his closet. Some of the photos were of me inside our apartment. Some were taken while I was sleeping. I had to grab the back of a chair to stay standing. The room felt like it was tilting sideways. Lisa made a sound like she'd been punched. Detective Morrison kept talking in his calm, professional voice, explaining that they were processing the scene now and collecting evidence. They found notebooks, too, with detailed information about my schedule and habits. Everything was photographed and cataloged for the case. I felt physically sick hearing about the photos of me sleeping. That meant Barry came into my room while I was unconscious and vulnerable and took pictures of me. How many times had he done that? How many nights had I been asleep thinking I was safe in my own home while he was standing over me with a camera? Lisa grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. She kept saying she was so sorry over and over. She said this was all her fault. I couldn't process whether I blamed her or not. Everything felt too big and overwhelming to think about blame or fault. I just kept seeing Barry's friendly smile in my head and feeling sick that it had all been fake. Every single interaction for 2 years had been a lie. He wasn't my roommate or my friend. He was a stalker who moved into my home on purpose to watch me and control my life. The detective was still talking, but I couldn't focus on his words. My brain felt full of static. Detective Morrison said I would need to come to the police station tomorrow to give a formal statement. I would also need to identify my belongings that Barry had in his possession to prove they were mine. But for tonight, they were putting me in a hotel room under police protection. They needed to make sure Barry couldn't make bail and come after me. I just nodded. I didn't know what else to do. Lisa asked if she could stay with me because she was scared Barry would somehow get out and come after both of us. Detective Morrison looked at her for a second, then agreed it was safer if we stuck together. He said he'd have an officer assigned to protect us, and the officer would stay outside our hotel room. We followed him out of the hospital through a back exit. There was an unmarked police car waiting for us. The drive to the hotel took about 20 minutes. Neither Lisa nor I said anything the whole way. The officer driving didn't try to make conversation. We pulled up to a hotel near the highway. Detective Morrison walked us inside and got us checked in under fake names. He handed me a room key and said the protection officer would be here within the hour. He told us not to leave the room and to call him immediately if anything felt wrong. The hotel room was generic and plain with 2 beds and a small bathroom. Lisa and I walked in and just stood there for a minute. It was the first time we'd been alone together in 3 years. The silence felt heavy and awkward. There was so much to say, but I didn't know where to start. Lisa sat down on one of the beds. I sat on the other one. We both stared at the ugly carpet. Finally, she asked in a quiet voice if I hated her for leaving the way she did. I looked at her. She looked exhausted and scared and smaller than I remembered. I told her honestly that I didn't know what I felt. Part of me understood she was trying to protect me, but another part was angry that she didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. We could have faced this together. Instead, she sacrificed 3 years of both our lives and her mother's safety. I said I needed time to process everything, because right now, I was too overwhelmed to know what I felt about anything. Lisa started crying. Not loud, dramatic crying, but quiet tears running down her face. She said she'd thought the same thing 1,000 times over the past 3 years. She explained that when she went to the police back then, they told her stalkers often get more dangerous when confronted. They said involving me could put me at greater risk. She was terrified Barry would hurt me if she told me what was happening, so she thought making a clean break and disappearing completely was the only way to keep me safe. She thought if she just vanished from my life, then Barry would lose interest and move on. She never imagined he would find me anyway. She never thought he would track me down and move into my apartment. Her voice broke when she talked about her mother. She said she'd been so careful for 3 years moving and changing jobs and looking over her shoulder constantly. But Barry still found her mom, still hurt her mom, and now her mom would never fully recover. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just sat there. We talked through most of the night. Lisa told me about everything that happened after she left. She moved 4 times in 3 years. She changed jobs twice. She lived in constant fear, always watching for Barry, always wondering if he'd find her. She couldn't make real friends because she was too scared to let anyone get close. She couldn't date because she didn't want to put anyone else in danger. She basically put her whole life on hold, trying to stay safe. Meanwhile, Barry had been in my apartment the whole time. He'd been living 20 feet from my bedroom pretending to be a normal guy, pretending to be my friend, just waiting for his chance, waiting to find Lisa again, or waiting to do something to me. I told Lisa about the past 2 years living with him, how normal everything seemed, how he was always friendly and helpful, how he never did anything that seemed weird or wrong. She said that's what made it so scary. Barry was good at pretending, good at blending in, good at making people trust him. That's why the police couldn't do anything 3 years ago. He never made direct threats. He never did anything obviously illegal until he attacked her mom. He was too smart to get caught. The next morning, Detective Morrison picked us up and drove us to the police station. He took me into an interview room and had me sit down at a table. A camera in the corner recorded everything. He asked me to describe the past 2 years living with Barry in as much detail as I could remember. I started talking about how Barry answered my Craigslist ad looking for a roommate, how his references checked out and he seemed normal and friendly, how he moved in, and we developed what I thought was a real friendship. I described all the times he asked questions about my day, about my job, about my relationships, about my past, about my plans. Everything I thought was just friendly roommate interest was actually him watching me, actually him learning everything about me. Detective Morrison took notes while I talked. Sometimes he asked follow-up questions about specific dates or events. The whole statement took almost 3 hours. By the end, my throat was dry and I felt exhausted. Morrison said I did great, and this statement would be crucial for the prosecution's case. He said Barry wasn't getting out of jail anytime soon. Detective Morrison led me to another room where boxes of evidence sat on a long table. He pulled out the first notebook and opened it. My name appeared at the top of every page. Dates, times, places I went, people I talked to, what I wore, what I ate for breakfast. 2 years of my life documented in Barry's handwriting like I was some kind of science project. My hands shook as I flipped through the pages. He knew everything. When I left for work, when I came home, when I went to the gym, when I had friends over. The level of detail made my stomach turn. Detective Morrison opened another notebook. This one had Lisa's name. Photos of her from 3 years ago were taped to the pages. Someone had scratched out her eyes in every picture. Written across the photos were words I couldn't read without feeling sick. Threats about what he wanted to do to her. Descriptions of violence that made me understand why she ran. I had to leave the room. I made it to the hallway bathroom and threw up. When I came back, Detective Morrison had more to show me. Photos of me sleeping. Dozens of them. Barry had been in my room while I slept and taken pictures. Some showed me in just my underwear. Others caught me in vulnerable positions. I felt violated in a way I couldn't put into words. The detective showed me printed screenshots from my social media accounts. Barry had been tracking everyone I interacted with online. He had notes about my friends, my coworkers, even people I barely knew. He'd mapped out my entire social network like he was planning something. I had to leave the room again. This time I just stood in the hallway trying to breathe. Lisa found me there and put her hand on my shoulder, but I couldn't look at her. I felt too exposed, too vulnerable, knowing Barry had documented everything about me. A man in an expensive suit arrived an hour later. He introduced himself as Barry's attorney and asked to speak with Detective Morrison privately. I heard raised voices through the door. When they came out, the lawyer tried to talk to me. He suggested this was all a big misunderstanding. He claimed Barry was just a concerned roommate who kept detailed household schedules. He said the notebooks were Barry's way of being organized and helpful. He tried to explain away the photos by saying Barry was worried about my safety and documented my routines to make sure I was okay. The lawyer's words made me angry in a way I hadn't felt before. Detective Morrison cut him off and pointed to the evidence. The photos of Lisa with violent threats weren't household schedules. The pictures of me sleeping weren't safety concerns. The GPS tracker under my car wasn't being helpful. The evidence was overwhelming and the lawyer knew it. He left quickly after that, probably realizing he had a losing case. A woman in a business suit arrived next. She introduced herself as the prosecutor assigned to Barry's case. She sat down with Lisa and me in a conference room and spread out papers on the table. She explained that Barry was charged with multiple crimes. Stalking charges for what he did to Lisa over 4 years. Assault charges for attacking Lisa's mother and putting her in the hospital. Breaking and entering charges for getting into Lisa's mother's house. Unlawful surveillance charges for the GPS tracker and the photos of me sleeping. The prosecutor said Barry had a record. Nothing violent before, but restraining orders from 2 other women in different states. The pattern of behavior made the current charges more serious. She explained that with the evidence they had and Barry's history, the judge would likely deny bail. Barry would stay in jail until the trial. The prosecutor told us the trial would probably happen in 3 or 4 months. She said she'd need both of us to testify. She warned us that Barry's lawyer would try to make us look unreliable or overdramatic, but she felt confident the evidence would speak for itself. After the prosecutor left, Detective Morrison told me I could go back to my apartment with a police escort to get my things. 2 officers drove me there in the afternoon. Walking up to the building where I'd lived for 2 years felt wrong. Everything looked the same, but knowing what Barry had done there changed it completely. The officers went in first and checked every room. Then they stood by while I grabbed clothes from my closet and important papers from my desk. I couldn't bring myself to take much. Everything felt contaminated by Barry's presence. I threw clothes into a duffel bag as fast as I could. I grabbed my laptop, my passport, some photos. I left behind furniture, kitchen stuff, most of my belongings. I just wanted out. The whole thing took maybe 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. My skin crawled the entire time knowing Barry had been in my room taking photos while I slept. I kept looking at my bed and feeling sick. The officers helped me carry my stuff to the car and we left. I never went back inside that apartment again. My landlord called me that evening. Detective Morrison had already contacted him and explained the situation. The landlord said he was horrified to learn what happened. He told me not to worry about breaking the lease. He wouldn't charge me the penalty fee that was normally required. He said he'd have the locks changed immediately and find a new tenant. He apologized multiple times like it was somehow his fault for renting to Barry. I thanked him and hung up. Lisa helped me look for a new place to live. We spent the next day driving around looking at apartments. I needed somewhere that felt safe. Somewhere Barry couldn't find me, even after he eventually got out of prison. We found a building across town with security cameras in the lobby and a doorman who checked everyone coming in. The apartment was smaller than my old place and cost more, but I didn't care. I signed the lease the same day. Lisa told me her mother was moved to a long-term care facility. The hospital said her mother was stable enough to leave, but would need constant care. The brain damage from Barry's attack meant she couldn't live independently anymore. Lisa planned to stay in the area to be close to her mother and to testify at Barry's trial. Over the next few weeks, Lisa and I spent a lot of time together. We got coffee and talked about what happened. We went for walks and tried to process everything. It felt strange being around her again. She was familiar, but also like a completely different person than the one I knew 3 years ago. We were both dealing with trauma and trying to support each other through it. Sometimes we'd sit in silence because there was too much to say. Other times we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. We were getting to know each other again, but as different people shaped by pain and survival. I started going to therapy again. My old therapist referred me to someone who specialized in stalking victims and privacy violations. The new therapist helped me understand that what Barry did wasn't my fault. She explained that predators like Barry are skilled at manipulation. They know how to seem normal and trustworthy. They study their targets and learn exactly how to blend into their lives. She said I couldn't have known because Barry was good at hiding who he really was. The therapy sessions helped, but I still felt violated every time I thought about those notebooks and photos. Lisa visited her mother every single day at the care facility. Sometimes I went with her. Her mother had good days and bad days. Some days she recognized Lisa and could hold a conversation. Other days, she didn't know where she was or who Lisa was. The brain damage affected her memory and cognitive function in ways that would never fully heal. Watching Lisa deal with that grief was hard. She'd sit by her mother's bed and talk to her, even when her mother didn't respond. She'd tell stories about their life together and show photos on her phone. Sometimes her mother would smile or squeeze Lisa's hand. Other times, she'd just stare blankly at the wall. Lisa never complained or got frustrated. She just kept showing up every day. Detective Morrison called me 6 weeks after Barry's arrest. He said Barry had tried to contact me through a third party. Someone Barry knew had called my old phone number and left a message asking me to talk to Barry. The message violated the restraining order the court had issued. Detective Morrison said this was serious. The judge revoked Barry's bail permanently. Barry was moved to a more secure facility with stricter monitoring. The detective told me Barry was getting increasingly upset as the trial date got closer. He'd been acting out in jail, getting into arguments with guards, refusing to cooperate with his lawyer. The detective said this actually helped the prosecution's case because it showed Barry's true nature, but it also meant we needed to be extra careful about our safety. 2 weeks later, the prosecutor called us to her office downtown to prepare for trial. She was a woman in her 40s with short brown hair who spread photos and documents across the conference table between us. She explained that Barry's defense lawyer would try to make him look mentally ill instead of criminal. They'd argue he couldn't help his behavior because of some disorder, but she said the notebooks proved Barry planned everything carefully over years. The GPS tracker, the photos, the way he answered my apartment ad on purpose. All of it showed he knew exactly what he was doing and made choices to do it anyway. She told us the trial would be hard. Barry's lawyer would try to make Lisa look paranoid and me look oblivious. They'd suggest we misunderstood his actions or made them seem worse than they were, but the evidence was strong. The attack on Lisa's mother was brutal and couldn't be explained away. She asked if we were ready to testify and face Barry in court. Lisa squeezed my hand under the table and said yes. I nodded, even though my stomach felt sick, thinking about sitting in the same room as him. 3 months after Barry's arrest, the trial finally started. The courthouse was old with tall ceilings and wooden benches that creaked when you moved. Lisa had to testify first because the prosecutor wanted the jury to hear about the stalking before anything else. I sat in the gallery and watched her walk to the witness stand. She wore a blue dress and kept her hands folded in her lap. The prosecutor asked her to describe when the stalking started. Lisa explained about the notes on her car 4 years ago, then the photos of us together with my face scratched out, the threats saying he'd hurt me if she didn't leave. Her voice stayed steady, even when she talked about going to the police and them saying they couldn't do much without direct threats to her life. She described the choice she made to ghost me to keep me safe, how she moved 4 times and changed jobs twice trying to get away from him. Barry's lawyer stood up for cross-examination. He asked if she ever actually saw Barry following her back then. Lisa said no, but she had the notes and photos. He suggested maybe she was stressed and overreacting to coincidences. The prosecutor objected, and the judge told him to move on. Lisa's hands shook, but her voice didn't waver when she answered his questions. Then it was my turn to testify. Walking to the witness stand felt like moving through water. I could feel Barry's eyes on me from the defense table, but I didn't look at him. The prosecutor asked me to describe the 2 years living with Barry. I told the jury about how normal he seemed, how he made coffee every morning and asked about my day, how we'd watch movies together and he'd help with chores. He seemed like a regular guy and a good roommate. Then she asked how I felt learning the truth. I had to stop and breathe before I could answer. I said it felt like my home had been violated, like every private moment for 2 years had actually been surveillance. The prosecutor showed the jury some of the photos Barry took of me sleeping. I described finding them in the police evidence. Several jury members looked away from the screen, looking disturbed. One woman in the front row put her hand over her mouth. Barry's lawyer asked if Barry ever threatened me or acted violent toward me. I said no, but that didn't change what he did. The lawyer tried to suggest Barry was just a lonely person who wanted friendship. I said friends don't secretly photograph each other sleeping or track each other with GPS devices. The prosecution spent the next day presenting evidence. They showed the notebooks with pages of details about my schedule and habits. Barry had written down what time I left for work every day, what I ate for breakfast, when I went to bed. The prosecutor displayed the photos on a large screen, pictures of me sleeping, pictures of me in my apartment, pictures taken through my bedroom window from outside. They presented the GPS tracker that was stuck under my car. Then Lisa's mother's doctors testified about her injuries. They described the skull fracture and brain damage from the attack. They explained she'd never fully recover her memory or cognitive function. The defense lawyer argued that Barry was obsessed, but not dangerous. He said the attack on Lisa's mother was a single incident caused by mental illness, not criminal intent. But the prosecutor brought up the threats Barry made in his notes about hurting people who got between him and Lisa. The evidence of planning and premeditation was everywhere in those notebooks. On the 4th day, Barry's lawyer made a huge mistake by letting him testify. The prosecutor had told us most defense lawyers keep their clients off the stand because it usually goes badly. But Barry insisted he wanted to tell his side. He wore a suit and looked calm when he sat down. His lawyer asked him to explain his relationship with Lisa. Barry said he loved her and just wanted to protect her from people who didn't understand her. He said he befriended me to stay close to her memory after she left. The way he talked about Lisa made my skin crawl. He used words like mine and belonged like she was an object he owned. When the prosecutor cross-examined him, she asked why he attacked Lisa's mother. Barry said he went there to find information about where Lisa moved. He claimed Lisa's mother attacked him first, and he defended himself. But the medical evidence showed Lisa's mother was hit from behind. The prosecutor asked if he regretted his actions. Barry said he regretted that Lisa got scared and wouldn't talk to him anymore. He didn't mention the brain damage he caused, or the 3 years of fear. Several jury members were shaking their heads. One man in the back row had his arms crossed and was staring at Barry with obvious disgust. The jury went to deliberate after closing arguments. Lisa and I waited in a small room down the hall from the courtroom. We didn't talk much. She held my hand, and we both stared at the wall. Less than 4 hours later, the bailiff came to tell us the jury had reached verdicts. We walked back into the courtroom and sat behind the prosecutor's table. The jury foreman stood up and read the verdicts one by one. Guilty of stalking. Guilty of assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. Guilty of breaking and entering. Guilty of unlawful surveillance. Guilty on every single charge. Barry's face didn't change at all. He just sat there staring at Lisa with this intense look that made me want to put myself between them. The bailiff must have noticed because he moved to stand directly in Barry's line of sight, blocking his view of her. The judge thanked the jury and set a sentencing date for 2 weeks later. As they led Barry out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he tried to turn back to look at Lisa one more time, but the bailiff pushed him forward. 2 weeks later, we were back in the same courtroom for sentencing. The judge asked if we wanted to give victim impact statements before he decided Barry's punishment. Lisa went first. She stood at a podium facing the judge and described the 3 years she spent living in fear, moving constantly, looking over her shoulder everywhere she went, never feeling safe enough to build a real life or maintain friendships. Then she talked about her mother, how her mother would never be the same person again, how the brain damage stole her memories and her independence, how Lisa had to watch her mother struggle to remember her own daughter's name. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. She said Barry didn't just hurt her body. He hurt her ability to trust people and feel safe in the world. When she finished, the judge thanked her, and she came back to sit next to me. Then it was my turn. I talked about the violation of trust, how I'd welcomed Barry into my home thinking he was a normal person looking for a place to live, how every kind gesture he made was actually part of his surveillance. I described the ongoing anxiety I felt now, how I checked my car for tracking devices every time I got in it, how I couldn't sleep without checking all the locks twice, how I'd lost the ability to take people at face value because Barry taught me that anyone could be hiding something terrible. The judge listened to both of us without interrupting. Then he looked at Barry and said he'd reviewed all the evidence and heard all the testimony. He said Barry's actions showed clear premeditation and planning over multiple years. The attack on Lisa's mother caused permanent injury. The stalking behavior was persistent and escalating. Barry showed no real remorse or understanding of the harm he caused. The judge sentenced Barry to 15 years in prison with mandatory mental health treatment. He said it was a serious sentence that reflected the serious nature of the crimes and the lasting damage to the victims. Barry would be eligible for parole after serving at least 10 years, but only if he completed the treatment program and showed genuine change. The bailiff stood Barry up to lead him out. Barry didn't look at either of us this time. He just stared straight ahead as they walked him through the door toward the cells in the back of the courthouse. The door closed behind him with a heavy metal sound that echoed through the quiet courtroom. After the sentencing, Lisa and I left the courthouse and went to a small restaurant a few blocks away. It was the first time we'd gone anywhere together that wasn't related to police or lawyers or hospitals since everything happened. We sat in a booth by the window and ordered food neither of us really wanted. For a while, we just sat there looking at each other across the table. Finally, Lisa said it felt like we could breathe now. Barry was locked away and couldn't hurt us anymore. I agreed, but part of me still felt on edge like I was waiting for something else to go wrong. She reached across the table and took my hand. She said she knew this didn't fix everything that happened or erase the trauma, but it was a turning point, a place where we could start moving forward instead of just surviving. I squeezed her hand back. The food came and we ate slowly, talking about small things that had nothing to do with Barry or stalking or trials, what movies we wanted to see, places we might want to visit someday. Normal conversation that felt strange and good at the same time. When we finished eating, we stayed at the table talking. Lisa brought up the question we'd both been avoiding. She asked if I thought there was any possibility of us rebuilding what we had 3 years ago. I was quiet for a minute, thinking about how to answer honestly. I told her we were both different people now. The last 3 years changed us in ways we couldn't undo. She'd lived in fear and survival mode. I'd gone through grief and confusion, and then terror. We weren't the same people who were together before, but I said there was still something there. Some connection that never fully broke even when she disappeared. Even when I thought I'd never see her again. Even when I found out the truth about Barry. She nodded and said she felt it too. We agreed we couldn't just pick up where we left off like nothing happened, but maybe we could build something new. Something based on who we actually are now instead of who we used to be. It would take time and honesty and probably more therapy for both of us, but we wanted to try. Lisa made her decision 2 weeks after the sentencing when her mother's care facility called about some paperwork. She told me she was staying in the area permanently instead of going back to her old life hours away. Her mother needed her close by, and honestly, she said she needed to be near me too while we figured out what we were rebuilding. She started applying for jobs at marketing firms in the city, and within a month, she had 3 offers. She picked a smaller company that gave her flexibility to visit her mother during lunch breaks and leave early when needed. The job paid less than her old position, but she said money mattered less than being where she needed to be. She found an apartment 10 minutes from the care facility, in a quiet building with good security. I helped her move in on a Saturday, carrying boxes up 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken. Her place was small but bright with big windows that let in afternoon sun. She decorated it simply with a few photos of her mother from before the attack and some plants she said she'd probably kill within a month. We ordered pizza that night and ate it sitting on her floor because her furniture wouldn't arrive until Tuesday. It felt normal and comfortable in a way I didn't expect. Over the next few months, we saw each other 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes we'd meet for coffee between her work and mine. Other times she'd come to my new apartment for dinner and we'd watch movies until she fell asleep on my couch. We didn't rush anything physical, a few kisses here and there, but mostly we just spent time together relearning how to be around each other. My therapy sessions helped me work through the violation of having Barry in my home for 2 years. My therapist taught me techniques for managing the anxiety that came with it. I stopped checking my car for tracking devices every single time I got in it. I stopped jumping when someone walked too close behind me on the sidewalk. I still had bad nights when I'd wake up convinced someone was in my apartment, but those got less frequent. My new place felt safe in a way my old apartment never had even before I knew about Barry. I'd picked a building with a doorman who checked IDs and security cameras in every hallway. I installed extra locks on my door and a video doorbell that sent alerts to my phone. I bought blackout curtains so nobody could see inside from the street. These measures helped me sleep better at night, knowing I'd taken real steps to protect myself. I started feeling more aware of my surroundings in a healthy way instead of being paranoid. I noticed when someone followed too close or when a car circled the block twice, but I didn't let that awareness control my life the way fear had controlled Lisa's for 3 years. 6 months after the trial, Lisa suggested we take a weekend trip together. She'd found a cabin rental 3 hours north near a lake where we could hike and disconnect from everything. I was nervous about being that far from the city and that isolated, but I also knew we needed to make new memories that weren't connected to courtrooms and hospitals. We drove up on a Friday afternoon with a cooler full of food and a bag of board games. Lisa insisted we'd actually play. The cabin was small and rustic, with a wood stove and a porch overlooking the water. That weekend, we hiked 5 miles through woods that smelled like pine and rain. We cooked meals together in the tiny kitchen and played cards at night while the fire crackled. We talked about things that had nothing to do with Barry or stalking or trauma. Lisa told me about a coworker who brought his dog to the office and how it made everyone happier. I told her about a project at work I was excited about that might lead to bigger opportunities. We laughed at stupid jokes and burned the pancakes on Saturday morning and fell asleep on the couch watching a movie neither of us cared about. It was healing to just be normal together, without the weight of everything that happened pressing down on us. Lisa visited her mother 3 times a week at the care facility. Some days her mother recognized her, and they'd sit together looking at old photo albums. Other days, her mother thought Lisa was her sister, who died 20 years ago, or didn't recognize her at all. The doctors said this was normal for the kind of brain injury she'd sustained. There would be good days and bad days, but she'd never fully recover the person she was before Barry attacked her. Lisa struggled with grief over losing her mother, even though her mother was still alive. She went to a support group for families of brain injury survivors, and that helped her accept the situation. She told me one night that she was grateful her mother survived at all. They still had time together, even if it looked different from before. Her mother was stable and receiving excellent care, and sometimes she'd have a clear moment where she'd squeeze Lisa's hand and say her name correctly. Those moments meant everything. At work, I'd been pushing for a promotion for almost 2 years before everything happened with Barry. My boss called me into her office one Tuesday and told me the position was mine. She said my resilience and strength through difficult circumstances showed real character and the kind of leadership the company valued. The promotion came with a significant raise and more responsibility managing a small team. I felt proud that something positive came from all the pain and trauma. It proved I could still move forward professionally, despite everything else happening in my personal life. Lisa took me out to dinner to celebrate, and we toasted with cheap wine and talked about what I'd do with the extra money. A few weeks after my promotion, Lisa and I had a serious conversation about what we were doing. We'd been seeing each other regularly for almost 8 months, but hadn't defined what we were. She asked if I wanted to make it official and be in a relationship again. I said yes, but I also said I thought we needed to acknowledge this was something new we were building. We weren't the same people who dated 3 years ago. We'd both been through trauma that changed us. We were more honest now about our fears and needs. We communicated better because we'd learned what happened when we didn't. We appreciated each other's strength in ways we couldn't have before. She agreed completely. This was a new relationship built on who we actually were now, not who we used to be. Detective Morrison called me on a random Thursday afternoon about 10 months after Barry's arrest. He said he wanted to update us on Barry's status in prison. Barry was settling in without causing problems and attending his required therapy sessions. The prison psychologist reported he was making progress, though the detective was quick to say that didn't undo the harm Barry caused. Morrison told me we should feel proud of our bravery in facing Barry in court and helping put him away. Our testimony made a real difference in the length of his sentence. I thanked the detective for everything he'd done and for calling with the update. It helped to know Barry was where he belonged and wasn't getting out anytime soon. A year after Barry's arrest, Lisa and I were building a life together that felt real and solid. We'd moved in together 2 months earlier into a bigger apartment that felt like ours, instead of just mine or just hers. We both still had moments of anxiety when we'd check the locks twice or feel uneasy in crowds. We both still had nightmares sometimes about everything that happened, but we were healing together, and that made it easier. We'd learned that closure wasn't about perfect endings where everything got fixed and tied up neatly. It was about choosing to move forward despite the scars and the fear and the ways we'd been changed. We were both choosing each other every day and choosing hope for whatever came next, instead of letting what happened define the rest of our lives.